start recording now. So once again, welcome to the social engagement #1 strategy of the VSHSL for support senior centers. This is the first VSHSL strategy to go out to the provider community for the new levy. So really glad to see you all here. Thank you for taking the time this afternoon. To my colleagues at King County, I am not going to be able to see the Zoom meeting at all as I talk, so please interrupt me if you need to. Okay. So want to do some quick introductions. I'm joined here by several of my King County colleagues, but these are the folks who are going to be speaking today. My name is Nora Irwin Stewart, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Older Adults and Healthy Aging Community Investment Team Lead. If I haven't met you yet, I look forward to meeting you soon. I am the procurement lead for this procurement, but by no means the only expert in the room. This has been a collaboration getting this put together for you all, and will continue to be throughout the entire life of the contract process. Once they start talking, I will let my colleagues introduce themselves, but you will hear from Tracy Adair, our Policy and Community Engagement Team Lead for Older Adults and Healthy Aging, Esther Lee, Policy and Community Engagement Team Member, and Joanna Armstrong with our DCHS Contracts and Procurement Specialist Team. We will also hear from Angela Miyamoto at the end of the session regarding City of Seattle Senior Center investments. So our agenda for today, we should have lots of time to go over in detail everything that's in the RFP, which we hope you've already had a chance to see. We're going to briefly talk about what is the Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy. We're going to give an overview of the Support Senior Centers strategy, and then we'll talk specifics about the Support Senior Centers RFP itself. We'll go over the grant assistance available to some organizations, and then Joanna will give a walkthrough of Zoom Grants itself, which is a separate application. And then again, we'll hear from City of Seattle regarding their senior center investment. And then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. So we do ask that you hold your questions to the end. If you'd like to put them in chat so you don't forget them, we will make note of them and we'll respond to them. And if we run out of time today, you can put questions in the chat and we will respond to them with a Q&A addendum following this meeting. Regardless, we are going to post all of the questions and answers received today on Zoom Grants, and any subsequent questions received over email will also be posted to Zoom Grants. Okay. So just a quick overview of the Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy. Hopefully you're already familiar from the last 3 instances since 2005. This is a 6-year property tax levy. It's been voter approved since it began in 2005. This last iteration passed with a 71% vote in August of 2023. There are 4 major funding areas. The first area is veterans, service members, and their families. The second is older adults and their caregivers, which is why you all are here today. The third is other resilient communities. We also have a new investment area called regional impact initiatives that affect all 3 populations. The 5 result areas that we invest in are housing stability, financial stability, healthy living, social engagement, and social service system access and improvement. So the senior center strategy falls under the social engagement strategy. So this levy is funded through a property tax of 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. And the projected revenue for this levy is $551 million over the course of the next 6 years. And this little pie chart just gives you a quick overview of how the investment is distributed between the 4 funding areas. So the VSHSL offers connection and community. The guiding principle of the VSHSL is to build and improve connections and community. Connections among the people the levy serves and among the people and organizations that provide the levy's services. We feel that people do best when they feel a sense of belonging based in personal relationships and connections to their communities. And King County has an overarching goal, an equity, race, and social justice goal to ensure that all people, regardless of who they are and where they live, have the opportunity to thrive with full and equal access to opportunities, power, and resources. Equity and social justice is key to the work of this levy and is embedded as principles throughout the RFP. We seek to support organizations that are reflective of and embedded in the communities they serve, and recognize and address the disparities and disproportionality that exists in our communities. And with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Esther Lee.
Hi, everyone. Esther Lee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in the Older Adults and Healthy Aging Units Policy and Community Engagement team. As folks might have seen in the Zoom grants, just going to provide an overview of the SC1 Support Senior Centers strategy as we see it. And so senior centers connect older adults to a wide network of critical aging services and supports across King County, leveraged through partnerships. And in 2022, DCHS met with senior center directors to inform the planning for the renewal of this levy. And it revealed the need for both foundational funding to support operations to a larger network of senior centers and supplemental funding for deeper investments in programming and inclusive outreach. So this strategy really attempts to leverage the capacity within this strengthened senior center system to increase connections and expand engagement with older adults, particularly those from communities that have been historically excluded due to systemic racism. So this RFP, in response to the conversations we had in 2022, has 2 parts. Responses to Part 1, or foundational funding, are required of all applicants to qualify as a VSHSL Senior Center and be invited to join the King County Senior Center Network. Responses to Part 2, or supplemental funding, are optional and are required only for senior centers wishing to also apply for additional funding. The focus populations for this RFP are seniors and their caregivers, seniors who have previously had no or limited involvement in senior center activities due to barriers such as language, transportation, mobility, cultural differences, and understanding, ageism, racism, LGBTQ+ status, and other factors that may contribute to isolation or exclusion. And seniors who are veterans, service members, or family members of a veteran or service member. So these are the eligibility requirements. To be established as an entity with 1 year of experience providing senior center services prior to application, and meet the definition of a senior center or attest to being able to meet the definition within 6 months of contract start date. And so to emphasize, both of the above conditions must be met to be considered for this funding. So this is our VSHSL, or Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy Senior Center definition. I will read it, all of it. So it's an entity that hosts a physical space for seniors, persons 55 and older, to gather in order to access services that promote healthy aging and to experience life enrichment, empowerment, belonging, and enjoyment. A senior center must meet the following requirements. 1, provide services or activities accessible to the public at least 3 days each week, with a weekly minimum of 15 hours of scheduled programming and operations. 2, senior center programming must regularly include all of the following services and activities. A, food and nutrition programs and/or congregate or shared meals. And B, social engagement activities. And C, information and assistance that connects individuals to aging networks and services. And D, health promotion, wellness, and/or fitness activities. And 3, services and activities can occur at different locations, provided that all location information is clearly specified on a schedule, which is easily accessible to all intended participants and relevant community organizations. Specified locations may include one or more buildings or spaces designed only for seniors, or within a multi-purpose building or space with sufficient time reserved only for the senior center programming, as described in items 1 and 2 above. Please note, a senior serving organization is not in and of itself a senior center unless it meets all of the above minimum requirements through the consistent and dedicated use of a physical space for programs dedicated to seniors on more than a weekly basis. Programs that rely on individuals meeting eligibility criteria or funded as a long-term service and support program do not meet the definition of a senior center. Programs for all-inclusive care for the elderly or PACE programs and adult day health or adult day care programs do not qualify as senior centers under the VSHSL definition. Sorry, my Zoom cut off the very last line. Let me just reorient.
Do you want me to read it for you?
I got it. Okay. So although the senior center is defined within a physical space, programming may also be offered online. The addition of online programming does not negate the requirement that a senior center must have a designated physical space or a series of spaces available to the public. A VSHSL Senior Hub. So the definition of a VSHSL Senior Hub is an individual senior center or group of partnering senior centers within the staffing, programmatic, and systems capacity to serve as a recognized resource center on aging services and supports with a focus on a particular geographic, cultural, or topic area. A senior hub will be available to seniors and their caregivers on a regular and consistent basis, 5 days per week, ideally several hours a day. If the senior hub consists of partnering senior centers, the times and location of services may be spread between the partnering centers in order to achieve the level of access required to be considered a senior hub. Services need not be equal at each partner site and may be structured so as to capitalize on the strengths that each partner brings to the partnership, as well as on the needs of the portion of the geographic area or population groups that each partner seeks to serve. Senior hubs actively engage in the King County Senior Center Network, which Tracy will expand upon after me, and partners with King County in race, age, diversity, and inclusion opportunities, or radio work. A senior hub may serve a focused geographic area and or specific cultural group or focused population, or provide expertise on a specific topic area. A senior hub actively engages in the network and partners with King County in radio work. And I will pass it to Tracy, who will describe the King County Senior Center Network.
And we can advance the slide to that. Perhaps.
I think I'm showing the network slide. Am I not?
You, sorry, I apologize. I had a little, was excited about the next slide. So I'm going to read the King County Senior Center Network is a consortium of senior centers joining as either individual senior centers that meet the VSHSL definition of a senior center, or individual senior centers that meet the definition of a senior hub, or partnerships between senior centers that create a senior hub. To be a member organization of the King County Senior Center Network is to partner with King County as an equity, race, and social justice change maker. Network partners actively work to undo institutional racism and ageism, especially against Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities. The network works to intentionally reduce disparities experienced by seniors who represent lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, LGBTQ plus identities, immigrant and refugee communities, and other systemically minoritized backgrounds, so that King County is a place where everyone can grow old with dignity. Participation in the network includes, but is not limited to, ongoing training for staff and volunteers, participation in regularly scheduled meetings, active engagement in race, age, diversity, and inclusion opportunities or radio, work and mediation when conflicts arise. The King County Senior Center Network prioritizes outreach, community engagement, partnerships, and programming that center and celebrate identities that have been historically underserved in the region. The purpose of the network is to strengthen King County's ability to provide the diversity of seniors in King County opportunities to be socially engaged. The network achieves this purpose through collaboration, partnerships, leveraging of funds, opportunities for trainings sponsored by DCHS, and facilitated connections to other county services. Here's a visual of the network. So at the table of the network could be a senior center, and you can imagine several of those blue versions, individual senior center contributing to and benefiting from the strength of the network. Individual senior hubs, you could have several of those purple versions there. Specialized focused topic areas that addresses a local need or provides expertise to other network members. We could be a partnering senior centers, senior hub. So several senior centers coming together as a hub that specializes on a geographic area, or you could be partnering centers, senior hub, several senior centers coming together with a specialized focus on cultural community or a topic area of expertise. So hopefully that visual gives an idea. And here are some specifics. So for the period of July 1st, 2024, when we anticipate contracts, until the end of the levy, December 31st, 2029, there is up to $38,891,594 available through this Social Engagement One Support Senior Centers strategy. This request covers up to $16,652,983,000 in VSHSL funds that will be awarded for the contract period July 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2026. So we are, this is an initial procurement for the social support senior centers strategy. King County reserves the right to extend contracts and or reopen procurements after December 2026. Program funding is contingent on approval of the King County Council budget and continued partnerships and provision of data on program performance and implementation. So here's where we're going to talk about the opportunity for funding through social engagement 1. Part 1 of the RFP covers foundational funding, and this is required part of the application. Approximately $12,849,500 is available across the King County Senior Center network during the contract period. So there are 2 categories of funding. Group A is eligible to apply up to $90,000 annually, and those are municipal centers or public organizations and or organizations affiliated with a research institute. And Group B is eligible to apply for up to $120,000 in foundational funding per year, and those are community-based organizations that are not affiliated with public or governmental agencies. Foundational award amounts will be prorated in 2024 and increase approximately 5% per year starting in 2026. King County intends to award no more than 44 senior centers. This is the maximum allowable, and so the star for the annual amounts. Please note that this is the maximum allowable request per applicant in each group. However, requests should not exceed an applicant's capacity to expend funds. Quarterly actual expenditures are required of every VSHSL funded entity, and unspent funds may be recovered by King County. Part 2 of the application RFP covers supplemental funding, and this is optional. Approximately $3,803,483 is available through this contract period across the King County Senior Center network. Not all applications eligible for supplemental funding will be awarded, and partial amounts may be awarded based on the number of applicants and the strength of proposals. While there is no cap on the amount for each supplemental fund request, King County intends for this funding to be awarded to as many as 22 senior centers. The number of awards is subject to the amounts requested and availability of funds.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, in these next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about what kinds of expenses are eligible under these 2 funds. So part 1 for the foundational funds, it can cover all of the expenses you see here. And just to reiterate that all of the text we are reading today is directly from the RFP itself. Number 1, operation as a senior center as defined in this request. Number 2, funds can go to participation in the King County Senior Center network. And number 3, outreach and or other programmatic activities that strengthen the senior center's inclusion of otherwise isolated seniors. Other eligible expenses can include staffing, training and education, transportation, vans or other vehicles, and or the ongoing associated expense of those vehicles, food, administrative costs, equipment and supplies, program expenses, flexible financial assistance provided to seniors, activities related to being a cultural or topic area senior hub, such as but not limited to partnership activities among senior centers that have formed into a senior hub, collaborations with other CBOs, training and education activities offered to other members of the network on specific topic areas, capital costs that support stabilization of the senior center, including costs associated with green energy improvement, such as heat pumps, solar panels, air filtration systems, or that increase the senior center's accessibility and inclusion. specialized services or supports focused on seniors with specific needs or a specific population of seniors who have experienced health disparities or have experienced inequities due to systemic racism and other costs associated with operating a senior center. And before I read the next, I just want to see if there's ambient noise on my end and if, okay. Can I ask, Tracy, can you read the text on this slide?
Part 2, the supplemental funds can cover all the activities allowed through foundational funding beyond the budget available through foundational funding, with priority on activities related to being a cultural or topic area senior hub, such as, but not limited to, partnership activities among senior centers that have formed into a senior hub, collaborations with other community-based organizations, training and education activities offered to other members of the network on specific topic areas. Also, activities related to proposals, projects, programs unique to the applying senior center, but such as, but not limited to, outreach and support to specific community of elders, for example, seniors with disabilities, people experiencing homelessness, seniors who are homebound, etc. Dementia-friendly programming for underrepresented populations, increase in care coordination and social services, digital navigation, intergenerational programming, capital costs, including green energy improvements like heat pumps, solar panels, and air filtration that help senior centers reduce their carbon footprint, or a localized need or service gap identified in your particular senior population. And I will just continue to read this until Nora tells me they want to take it back. Just some notes about contract requirements regarding evaluation. While you are not required to submit a detailed, fully developed evaluation plan, please be sure your program model accounts for the strategy's anticipated core performance measures. And you can look at page 25 to 26 of the request for proposals document for detailed outlines. Data collection and reporting will include client level data as well as aggregate and narrative reports. Here's some just logistical considerations for the RFP timeline. We released this RFP on January 24th. Today is February 7th, and this is the information session. The final day for small agencies to initiate requests for technical assistance in writing their grants is February 28th, 2024. The final days to submit questions and to receive a response through Zoom grants is March 6th, 2024. The RFP responses are due on March 13th, 2024 at 2 p.m. I just want to do a little song and dance. I'm supposed to dance in front of everybody. I tried to get people to put a little dance thing on here and they told me to do it. So this is me dancing to get your attention. 2 p.m. is the deadline for this RFP, 2 p.m. Responses will be reviewed and rated through March and April 2024. Interviews with applicants, if necessary, will occur mid-April 2024. Notification of awards decisions is anticipated in May of 2024, and we anticipate a contract start date of July 2024. And we're still okay. So we're applying to the RFP. Submit proposals in Zoom grants by 2 p.m. on March 13th, 2024. Complete submittals will include responses to summary questions, including attestations, responses to narrative questions, including budget for Part 1, foundational funding. Those 2 pieces are required. If you're applying for supplemental, then an optional to respond to narrative questions, including the budget for Part 2 supplemental funds. Grant assistance, free application support is available for small organizations with fewer than 20 not people, that's full-time equivalencies, and less than $4 million in operating budget in the prior fiscal year. Qualifying organizations should contact the technical assistance consultants directly, but before February 28th, 2024. And you can see attachment F in Zoom grants of the RFP for the list of consultants.
Thanks,
I'm going to
Tracy.
hand it over to Esther.
So I will go over the questions and the various parts that are part of responding to this request for a proposal. So under part 1, foundational questions, we do have a section on attestations. So why attestations? Attestations essentially qualify senior centers by outlining key expectations for our contracting partners. Selection of any or all boxes confirm applicants' understanding of those expectations as to be reflected in a final contract agreement. And so our attestations are regarding willingness and capacity to partner and work with King County as an equity, race, and social justice changemaker, a willingness and capacity to fully participate in the King County Senior Center Network, to not be in breach of contract with a King County Adult Services Division contract, having held a VSHSL contract as a senior center in 2023, or having 1 full calendar year or more of experience providing senior center services prior to 2024, and meeting the VSHSL definition of a senior center within 6 months of a contracting agreement, and can accept ad hoc, one-time, and or emergency funds to support essential services. These are the part 1 foundational narrative questions. I won't be reading them in detail, but wanted to highlight the various sections of questions that we'll be asking, that we are asking of folks. And so the first section has to do with experience, senior center experience, and qualifications. We also have a section on equity, race, and social justice. And part of the part 1 foundational narrative questions, we also have a section on data collection and evaluation. And we have a section on budget and fiscal management, which does include the submission of a 12-month budget, which all can be found in Zoom grants. And so the total the total points for part 1 is equal to 50 points. And now on to part 2. So our part 2 supplemental narrative questions, and as was stated, this part is optional, but for applicants interested in this supplemental funding, these narrative questions are required. We have a section asking applicants to describe their project proposal, and also a submission of a 12-month budget for supplemental funds. And this part 2 supplemental narrative section equals 50 points as well. This is an FYI for your information. There will be a new attachment added to Zoom grants with King County's most up-to-date demographic data regarding older adults 55 and above in various cities, zip codes, and communities in King County. And so this data is offered to you all, I guess, as a bit of a courtesy, and you may do with it what you desire, but it is there for your information. So our Zoom grants is the primary system that we'll use to collect all application materials. So all RFP materials are posted in Zoom grants. please check regularly for any updates, including amendments and responses to questions. All applications must be filled out and submitted via Zoom Grants. Questions and responses received today and those submitted in writing will be posted to Zoom Grants. And there is the link. I will now pass it over to my colleague Joanna Armstrong with our King County Contracts and Procurement team to do a walkthrough of the Zoom Grants.
Thank you, Esther. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joanna Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a contract specialist for the Department of Community and Human Services in King County, and I'm just here to do a demo for you. So I have put the link in the chat so that if it is helpful for you to follow along, please feel free to click that now, and then you can see what I'm doing and go through it yourself. So I'll just give you all a minute to do that while I share my screen. Can you all see the Zoom Grants application?
Yes.
Okay. So as I'm going, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions as I go. I can stop and focus on anything that you want me to clarify. And we're just going to go over some broader Zoom Grants information, then also specifics for this particular RFP. So to start, this is the screen you're going to see when you click on the link. And you can review the entire application without applying or without logging in, but I don't know why this is so hard to read, but just to highlight this here, you do need to be logged in to apply. So if you're ready to start your application, you can log in here in the upper right-hand corner. And if you need a new Zoom Grants account, you can click on this button here. So just to kind of train your eyes here, you'll see two rows of blue boxes. Here's the top row, and then I'll just scroll down to show you. There's a row down here. This row down here is the actual application. And up here is information about the RFP. So if you look at this first description here, this is an overview of the RFP. As we mentioned, there are two parts to this RFP. So part one is required for all applicants. And part two is just optional and required only for organizations wishing to also apply for supplemental funding. This is the timeline. As Tracy mentioned and danced to us, 2 p.m. is the deadline. The reason for 2 p.m. is because we want to make sure everybody is open and available to help you with any last-minute technical difficulties. Zoom Grants is in Colorado, so they're an hour ahead of us, and we want to make sure if there's any last-minute technical difficulties, Zoom Grants is available to help you, and anyone here will be available to help you. So once you're done reading the description, you can always click this button to hide it. And then that brings us to eligibility. Please take a minute to read through each of these to make sure that you are actually eligible to apply. And this tab is the library. This is where I'll hope you will come back here multiple times to keep checking for updates. As Esther just mentioned, any amendments or changes to this RFP will be posted in the library. You can see there's already been one amendment right here that has posted. That is also where we'll post all the Q&A. So anybody who asks a question about this RFP, we will write down the question and answer, and we'll post it here so everyone has access to the same information. And please make sure you review all of the attachments here carefully. Notice that some of them are duplicates. You'll see here, this is attachment B is in here twice. And attachment D is in here twice. The reason is that one of them is in a Microsoft Word format and the other is in a PDF to preserve the formatting. So just be aware there are some duplicates, and that is the reason for the duplicates. And then this tab here will just bring up an email for you to contact the RFP lead. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to hit this contact admin button, and an email will pop up so that you can send any questions in. So that is the top row of blue boxes. And then this bottom row of blue boxes, this is all tabs that you'll need to be filling out for the application. So this first one here is the summary tab. This is where you'll fill in your organization's information. And one thing that is specific to this RFP, please pay attention to the amounts requested. you'll see there's two different places here to enter the amounts requested. This first one is for the foundational supports that we mentioned earlier. And the second one is if you're requesting supplemental. So please make sure if you're requesting both pots of funding, please make sure to enter the amounts you're requesting for 12 months, I believe. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is for your budget for 12 months. And then please also scroll down here. There's this question about where you're serving clients. And this question is just about this particular program. So please check the boxes for all zip codes that you will be serving for this particular program. So that is the summary tab. And then we have this tab here, which is informational questions. These are all unscored, but they are required. And this is going to help us determine eligibility. And we'll just go through a couple of these questions. There is some important information to be paying attention to. So starting with question 4, you're identifying which data management system your organization currently uses to track senior activities. So please check all the systems that you use. If your system is not listed here, please check the box here for other. And then in this space provided, please include the name of the data management system. For question 5, does your organization currently meet the King County's definition of a senior center as outlined in the definition? Please go to section X of the RFP to look at the definition. And if you do meet that definition, you'll check the box for yes. And then you will go to question 1 in the narrative and budget questions tab, which is the next tab over. And I'll show you that in a minute. If you partially meet that definition, you'll check the box for partially, and you'll respond to question 2 in the next tab over. And here are the attestations that Esther just mentioned. So please make sure you read these very carefully and check the boxes to show that you attest. And do not miss this question. It's tucked away down here. If you are applying for VSHSL supplemental funding, there's a couple steps to do here. So you'll confirm here if you're going to be requesting this funding. And then please skip over to question 15 in the narrative and budget questions tab. And I'll show you that in just a second. And you will also complete and upload to the required documents tab, which is above, and I'll show you that in a minute as well, the part 2 narrative questions and the budget template. So that's attachments D and C. So I'll skip over to the next tab now. And please make sure to read these instructions as well as you go. So skipping down to question 15, if you're requesting the supplemental funding, is right here. So you'll check the box. And then we will jump over to the required documents tab to go upload those documents. And the required documents tab is all the way here at the top. So each of these will show if it's either required or if it's not, then it is optional. So the way you'll notice for some of the 3 of these document requests, they have templates associated with them. So if you need to submit attachment C budget template, please click on this link here to download the template. And you'll see there's this pop-up. You click open. And we just give it a minute to load so I can just show you the process. This document will come up. Just make sure you enable editing. You can fill this in as needed, save it to your desktop, and when it's complete, then you'll go back to this required documents tab, and then you'll click the upload button. And then once you click the upload, you can select the file path to find that budget template. And just make sure that if you are requesting supplemental funding, that you fill out all the other required attachments as well. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. I've got a couple more things to go over, but that was a lot. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've mentioned so far?
I do, Joanna. Can you hear me? Hi, my name is
you.
Carla Bunnan with the Southeast Seattle Senior Center. Could you please explain to us about collaborator accounts and when you need them?
Oh boy, that's a question that is just above my pay grade, but it's a really good question. The collaborators, you'll have to go through Zoom Grants administration to be able to make sure everybody's got the right access. The idea of collaborators is so that multiple people in your organization can all work on that application together. But I'm going to direct you to Zoom Grants support desk, which would be questions@zoomgrants.com, and they can help you set up any collaborator accounts. Do you want me to put that in the chat? Sorry.
Yeah, but you do know, or I guess I should ask, can you answer whether or not only the main account can actually submit the grant, or can a collaborator submit it, or should I ask them that question?
Yeah, that's for Zoom Grants. I don't know the answer to that one, but it's a good question, and I'm glad
Okay,
you're thinking
thank you.
about that. Yeah, thank you, Carla. Anything else? Anyone else?
That's me.
Yes.
Nelson here. Nelson Chen. So my name is Nelson Chen, and I'm the Corporate and Donor Relations Officer here at King On. So my question for you is, so you have the I guess the criteria for Group A and Group B, and then obviously if you want to apply for a Group B grant, you have to apply for Group A grant first. And so my question with respect to that is, if you want to apply for Group B grant, the Group B grant, do you have to be approved for the Group A before you're allowed to apply for Group B, or can you just apply for Group A first and then move on to Group B?
You're referring to the Part 1 and Part 2 foundational
Yeah,
supplemental?
about something. I think the Group A says like not to exceed 90,000, and the Group B says not to exceed 120,000.
Those are questions we can address. Those questions in a moment when we're done with the Zoom Grants orientation. We'll go back to questions about the RFP itself, and we'll do some clarifying about what Part 1 and Part 2 is versus the Group A and Group B.
Okay. Okay.
But as a quick question to answer that, you need to, in Zoom Grants itself, you need to complete Part 1 in order to then also complete Part 2 if you're choosing to apply for supplemental.
So yeah, so if you apply to choose to apply to Group 2, the Part 2, do you have to approve for Part 1 first before you can apply, or just finish off the application?
Complete the full application of all the pieces you're applying for. We'll provide some clarification on the groups versus Part 1 and Part 2 after the orientation.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I see another hand up.
It's Diane, and I know in the past in Zoom Grants, the days that the grants are due, it freezes up a lot. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, do you anticipate that happening again? So that's the reason of the 2:00 p.m. deadline.
I will say I don't personally anticipate it happening, but Zoom Grants does sense fear and anxiety, and it does tend to get, it seems that whenever anybody really needs to be submitting something, that's when Zoom Grants seems to have the most issues. That may actually be because too many people are on the website at the same time trying to submit. So that is definitely something to consider. So we do recommend that people finish up their applications as soon as possible and not wait too close to the 2 p.m. deadline, because the more people on there at the same time, the slower it runs and the less responsive it does become. So we definitely recommend doing that earlier, finishing up earlier, but you can email questions@zoomgrants.com if you're having technical difficulties. They respond like surprisingly quickly through email. But if you're really close to the deadline, and I would say even if it's the same day, don't risk a late application. I would suggest downloading your materials and emailing them to the program contact, which again, up here, you can just click this button for contact admin and attach all your materials, and you can let them know that you're still trying to work through any technical difficulties, but just to make sure that you get your application in, strongly recommend you email it. Does that answer?
Yes, I have done that before. I actually have experienced that. I say any 3 days out before the grant is due, it seems like everybody's on it, and it's really hard to even save your stuff. You know, I always do mine in Word so that I can just cut and paste, but I know that I've experienced that a lot in the past.
Yeah, thank you for lifting that up. It is something definitely to be aware of, and to the extent you can save your answers somewhere else in case there is a problem with this, I definitely encourage that. And it is a limitation of Zoom grants that if there's too many users at once, it does slow down and it becomes less responsive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat from Radrana about having a Zoom grants account, but her org has other accounts and hers is not an admin account. And it looks like it's giving an error message that doesn't allow access. Is it possible to get a new account when you already have an account?
That would be a questions at zoomgrants.com question. They can help you sort out any of those account difficulties. We're not able to get into anybody's account or access them or help with that part. And I can put that email address in the chat.
Thanks. I already sent the email just now.
Okay.
Frustrating system. I really would have wished Agiloft was up and running. Thank you,
Working
guys.
on it. Any other questions? It sounds like many of you are familiar with the quirks of Zoom grants, so I'll just give you a couple of others. It is definitely concerned that there may be some technical difficulties leading up towards the end. There also is no save button. So just so you know, there's two different ways to enter your information into this text box. You can do what was just suggested, which is enter it in a different document and then paste it into this text box. Just be aware if you do that, Zoom Grants does not play well with formatting. So clear all formatting before you paste it in there. And if you're typing directly into the box, you can do that as well. In order to save your work, you just click anywhere outside the text box. And then you'll see in the middle of the screen, all caps, saving. And you'll see that flash a few times. And that tells you that it's saved. What does happen sometimes, and this is always very frustrating, is that you go to click outside, it flashes saving for minutes and never goes anywhere. It's just sort of, I think at that point, the only thing I've been able to do is to just hit the refresh button on the browser and hope it's saved. So this is another good reason to save your work somewhere else as you go. And I'm not sure why this glitch hasn't been ironed out in Zoom Grants yet, but it is just something to be aware of. And yeah, and once I stop sharing my screen, I'll put the email to Zoom Grants in the chat. But yeah, those are just some of the quirks to be aware of. We also have some other applicant supports, and that we can provide if you're having any issues with Zoom Grants. There's some kind of like common errors that come up, and we can provide some resources for that as well. So I would just say that if you're having issues in the days leading up to submitting your application, please reach out to Zoom Grants questions at zoomgrants.com to see if they can help you. And if you're the day of, just email your application in, and then you can continue trying to get it through Zoom Grants portal. So that's all I have to share right now, unless there's any other questions. All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Joanna. Okay, I'm gonna reshare my screen. And just want to confirm you're back on the slide, the Zoom grant slide, okay? And now just gonna take a quick moment to hear from Angela Miyamoto with the City of Seattle.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. So I'm Angela Miyamoto. I'm a planner with City of Seattle Aging and Disability Services, Seattle Human Services Department. And today I'm here to talk about the City of Seattle funding as part of this process. So while we still intend to invest in the King County Senior Center Network and use this process to release City of Seattle funds, we're still waiting on final confirmation and approval to do so. The city anticipates an announcement about its investments in Seattle senior centers by the end of February, maybe sooner. But once we receive approval, the application process and supplemental questions for our City of Seattle funding will be released at that time. So an information session similar to this one will be scheduled. So all this information will be in attachment E in Zoom Grants. So again, attachment E will include information about the application process, supplemental questions, information session details, so including the date, time, and access links, that all of that stuff will be in attachment E. This information session will be only for our City of Seattle funding. We're really hoping that this will be a simple process, and we anticipate using information that you have provided in the King County's foundational funding application, as well as a few other questions as part of our rating process for City of Seattle funds. So please check Zoom grants regularly, as information can be released at any time. City of Seattle information, including the information details, will all be in attachment E. So please recheck attachment E.
Okay, thank you, Angela. And we have now reached our question period. So I'm gonna leave this screen up for just a moment and then I will stop sharing. But just so you all are aware, my email address is in Irwin Stewart. It's so hard for me to say my own email address. It's NERWINST@kingcounty.gov, and that is the email address you will see on Zoom grants. Should I be out of the office for any reason, you will get an auto reply message that tells you who to forward your question to. So keep an eye out for that, as I will be out for a couple of days in February. But please continue to send all questions to my email address. And if you ask me a question about Zoom grants, which I have received some, I will likely refer you to the email address Joanna mentioned, questions@zoomgrants.com, as we do not provide technical support with Zoom grants accounts. So I'm sorry for your difficulties with the program. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And I know I've seen some questions lining up in the chat. Let's see.
Nora, sorry to interrupt, but I
Go
can't
ahead.
find you. I just want to make sure we answer the question that came up during the Zoom grants question first, since it was there.
I believe that was Nelson. Do you want to
Nelson.
repeat your question, Nelson?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so there in the so in the group A and the group B, so obviously you have to in order to apply for group B, you have to apply for group A first. And so just kind of rehash. So group A is defined as not to exceed 90,000 initial annual award. And then the group B is not to exceed $120,000 initial annual award, and the group B is for CPOs. And so that being said, so when you apply for the group A, do you have to be approved for group A first before you can apply for group B, or can you just finish off with the application for group A and then move on to group B?
Okay, so I'm going to share the slide that contains relevant text to this question one more time. So just to kind of make a distinction here, there is the Part 1 foundational funding application, and within Part 1, there are two groups, essentially two different tiers of funding depending on your organization's status. So Group A is for municipal and public organizations or organizations affiliated with a research institute. So if that is your organization's category or type, then you would be a Group A applicant and you are eligible to apply for up to $90,000. If you are a community-based organization not affiliated with public or governmental agencies, you are eligible to apply for up to $120,000 annually. So there, you don't apply for both Group A and Group B. You just apply for one of those two in the foundational funds.
Okay. So yeah, so you don't have to apply for group A first before you can apply for group B. You apply for either or.
Correct. So you are required to submit a foundational funds application and you choose either Group A or Group B. And then optionally, if you want to add a supplemental funds request, you would respond to the Part 2 questions.
Okay, I think that's the part I got confused. I think I, well, sorry. So for the supplemental funding, do you have to be approved for what you applied for first before you can apply for the supplemental funding, or can you apply and then apply for supplemental funding as well on top of that?
So you submit the application at the same time. So the foundational fund requests and the supplemental fund requests will be reviewed and awarded at the same time.
Okay, cool. That answers my question.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Let's see. Esther, are you reading chat questions?
I am scrolling through.
Okay.
Radine, I do see the question kind of early on in the presentation asking to define foundational funding versus supplemental funding. Did Nora answer that question for you? Yes, okay. There is another question from Carrie around, I think specifically what would be an allowable capital funding expense. Does a senior center building outside siding, painting, and indoor flooring fall under allowable capital funding expenses?
That's a great question. And I think our answers here today are going to be preliminary. All of our questions are being recorded and we will be posting written responses. And I think we're going to internally discuss eligible expenses under the capital costs, as that is a relatively new funding category for this strategy.
Thanks, Nora. There's also a question, if applying as a senior hub with other senior centers, are all centers in the hub required to apply individually? Is there a 90,000 yearly cap for each senior center in the hub? And I can take this one on. Yes, each senior center is to apply individually. And the cap is dependent on the groups that Nora mentioned. So whether you are a municipal or public senior center or affiliated with a research institution or a community-based organization senior center, not affiliated with a municipality or public or affiliated with a research institution.
See some hands up too. Are we doing?
Let me go through the chat really quick. There is a question around whether supplemental funding can be isolated with or without the Part 1. And I believe Nora went through this as well. So essentially, Part 1 is required, and only by having completed Part 1 would you then be able to apply for Part 2 supplemental funding. And there's a couple questions related to the City of Seattle Senior Center procurement. I believe Angela is still on, so we have, will centers in Seattle be able to get VSHSL funds and Seattle funds?
So we are still in the process of being approved to move forward with adding our funds to this part. More to come on what that might look like after we receive approval, and the a way to know about that is through Zoom grants. So I see that other question about will information also be emailed to release when we get this, when we release information, is it going to be emailed to everything will be posted through Zoom grants, and as well as, you know, the information session details, the due dates, and everything that's included in that will all be in the attachment E in Zoom grants.
Angela, can I add a clarifying statement to what you just said? I think it's really clear. I just want to make sure we're all stating the same thing, that VSHSL funds are separate from the City of Seattle funds, and these are separate, even though they're using our foundational questions as initial. They'll have those additional questions for those centers who are who have locations in the City of Seattle, and we will those funding streams are separate, and the decisions related to the funding streams are separate.
Yeah,
so
it will be a separate rating panel, separate contracts, separate funding, if approved, to move forward.
So yes, please check back on Zoom grants for updates regarding the city's process, which will be in attachment E, as Angela mentioned.
Oh, sorry, this is Jocelyn. Just to follow up, Angela, thanks for your reply about the Zoom grants. This is Jocelyn from ACRS. So does that mean that the City of Seattle funding will only be open to this cohort of folks? Like, if they didn't join this, will they know, how will they know about the City of Seattle opportunity? Or is it meant to be a subset of folks?
So all the information regarding this, how City of Seattle intends to invest in the King County Senior Center network will be described if we're able to move forward, and we'll be giving more information through the information sessions and in attachment E.
Okay, thanks.
We have another question about capital projects. Will there be a prevailing wage requirement?
And I'm wondering if Joanna might know about clauses in other contracts. And if not, we will likely have to get back to you about that question.
We would have to get back to you about that question.
Thanks.
Excuse me, can I ask a question real quick? So should we be putting our questions in chat in order to have them answered, or are we supposed to just be raising our hands? I want to do one or the other. Should I put my question in the chat? Because I was told earlier that from the way it looked, the answer was responded that the questions would we be able to ask our questions later. But if I need to put it in the chat, I will. But could you tell me which are we doing? Asking the question or putting it in chat?
We are doing both, and we have until 5 o'clock. And it appears that the majority of folks have put their questions in the chat.
In the chat. Okay.
So, but you have the microphone right now. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Well, I didn't mean to do that.
No,
but
that's
thank
okay.
you very much.
That's okay.
Okay,
We don't
so
want, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I do have a couple of questions, but I'll make the first one really quick. And I just want to confirm that what I heard in the presentation is that we will be able to use foundational funding for operational expenses at the center. So we can use it however we need to use it.
Yes.
I'm just confirming that. Okay, and then also under the funded foundational funds, can you give us a little bit of background on the flexible financial assistance? Anything about that? Can you tell us anything about it? How do we establish the plans for that and the rules around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is new to this strategy. It has been funded in other strategies under VSHSL previously, and sort of by request for many senior centers, we have added this as an eligible expense. There is language that would be included in your contract if you opt for flexible financial assistance to kind of help guide the amount that you budget for it, as well as our requirements at the county for tracking the expenses. But so this can take several different forms in terms of providing like direct assistance to the senior or to provide expenses on their behalf. So I hesitate to give you an exhaustive list in spoken word, but we can include some examples in the written response. Does that help with your question for now?
It does a little bit, and there's some reading in there that I can do as well. And then the last one is on the trainers, the race equity consultants. Do we have an opportunity to choose who we'd like to come in and train us on, or do you have a list of people that we'd have to choose from, or do you just send someone out?
I can take that one on. We're in process of kind of developing a racial equity plan for this strategy, but would, very much welcome input for contractors to kind of determine the best training. We may go with a consultant, but there will be kind of a process to identify that. That's still
Okay.
TBD at this point.
Okay. And I would like to ask Linda Green if she feels comfortable with all of the funding that was allowed under the foundational funding. You're mute.
Can you please repeat your question?
I'm sorry, did you feel comfortable with what we see as all of the funding that's allowed under the foundational funding?
Uh-huh.
You feel good with that, with what you're seeing there?
At this point, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Nora.
It might be good to, do the raised hands. We are toggling a little bit between the chat. So let's see. Does it do it in order? I'm so sorry, that just kind of. Okay, well, first that I see is Diane.
Okay, thank you. I'll be brief. One of my questions was about the financial assistance as well. I know that we have experienced a lot more homelessness with our seniors, and we have brokered a relationship with Marriott so that we can purchase some hotel stays through them at a very good discount rate. Would that be an example of something that we might be able to use as financial assistance to others under that category? Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about? I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I believe so. And Tracy, you can nod or, yeah.
I think we'll have to sort through kind of what the extent of what those, because we have some other
Yes.
resources for those type of services. So we'll need to make sure that, answer
Okay.
to BD around the scope of that.
Okay.
Right.
Great question. Great
And
consideration.
then my next question was, we have been working on doing solar panels for our facility and have partnered with City Light. And so we're hoping, and some other Spear Solar Energy, to be able to facilitate some solar panels for the supplemental funding. But my question is that these relationships might happen by May or maybe a little bit before May. And I know that we haven't received money, but the relationships might happen by May because we have a plan and documents and things like that. So with that uncertainty of not being notified until perhaps July, would we be eligible to apply for supplemental funding if it, not that we would do the work, but we might be notified of monies by May? You know how you're not supposed to do anything until you have a grant committed?
Yes, so our hope is to notify in May for contracts that begin in July. And so the funds that you're awarded under this procurement would start hopefully July 1st. And so expenses incurred on or after July 1st would be would count for those future funds. If that
Okay.
makes sense, yeah.
Thank you.
Got Linda Green.
Hi, this is Linda Green with Southeast Seattle Senior Center. Hi, everyone. Angela, I have a question specifically for you, and this is regarding the City of Seattle funding. So my question is, for those who have already received a contract from the City of Seattle, how does that play into what you're proposing and what we're talking about now? I'm confused. Is this additional funding? Hopefully.
So again, when we're able to, if and when we get approved to move forward with this process, we'll have a separate information session scheduled to talk about City of Seattle funding, just for City of Seattle funding, and what that means and what the contract period would be for that when we're able to do that. Attachment E, please refer back to that, and all that will be there, including the information session for City of Seattle funding.
So
Sorry, I couldn't give you more.
No, that's okay.
No.
But what I think I hear you saying is there's still a lot of details yet to be confirmed. Right?
When we're able to
And
proceed, we're happy to share information that we can.
I will leave it at that, and thank you for the information.
All right, so I think we'll do maybe 2 more of the raised hands and then go back to the chat. Maria Glanz.
Thank you very much. I've got one that is particular. Sorry. I have one question that is particular to us and 2 that might be overall. The one that's particular, do you know yet if an organization will be eligible to apply in more than one strategy? We have a senior hub as well as a village program getting funds under 2 different strategies. And I don't know if I should put our village into supplemental funding or wait to apply for village funding. So I'm just curious if you know yet what will be allowed in terms of multiple strategy funding.
You want me to take this?
Sure.
Nora. Our intention across the VSHSL is to spread to a number of entities and to make sure that there are funds available for small entities that may not be funded through other strategies. That doesn't exclude necessarily on any particular strategy. It depends on that strategy. And so we can't speak about the village strategy at this point. But our intention is to provide opportunities for entities that may,
might not be funded
but through a different
otherwise.
another strategy.
Okay, great. Thank you. That does answer my question, at least in part. My second question, it sounds like we can include or apply or talk about capital costs both in a foundational section and or in supplemental, just based on what our needs are and how we structure the grant. Am I understanding that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And third question is just, are we able to ask more particular questions to Nora? Like, I just have a little bit of confusion around hub or center. We've been a hub. Are we more a center? Is that something we can email and ask about?
Yes, you can continue to send questions to me, and I'm just trying to flip through to find the date. The last date to send questions is March 6th. So we will post our last questions to Zoom grants shortly after March 6th.
Thank you very much.
Last raised hand, we have Tony Barbero.
Hi, yeah. So I'm from a United Indians of All Tribes Foundation. I actually put my question in the chat, but I guess I'll just read it out. So your definition of a senior center mandates services or activities accessible to the public at least 3 days each week with a minimum of 15 hours of scheduled programming and operations. So I just basically was curious because we do senior stuff, we do youth stuff, all kinds of stuff. So does that mean that that time, that 3 days a week, 15 hours a week, has to be for exclusively senior available programming, or just the total amount of programming with some proportion of that being dedicated to seniors, if that makes sense?
Yes, the programming requirement is for senior specific programming.
Exclusive access to, like, exclusively offered to seniors?
Tracy, I don't
Okay.
know, but the exclusive word.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have the spirit of a senior center, and the senior center is that seniors aren't necessarily only there alone as seniors, but there is
Right.
programming dedicated to seniors throughout those 3 days. 15
Okay, thank you
hours.
so much.
Okay, so I think that was the last raised hand so far. Going back to the chat, looks like we did answer Maria's question, so we'll go to the next one. If an agency has not had a senior center but has services that can be put in place within 6 months, are the eligible? Another way to look at this question is, are you funding new senior centers? And so if you kind of refer back to our original slides, or the first set of our slides in the eligibility section, we are asking that any applicant interested in the funds be established as an entity with 1 year of experience providing senior center services prior to application, and meet the definition of a senior center or attest to being able to meet our definition of a senior center within 6 months of contract start date. So both of these conditions must be met to be considered for this funding. And I don't know if other folks on the team would like to add anything.
Yeah, and it just going back to what Esther just said about the definition and the notes around the definition. It's just serving senior centers and a senior service organization in and of itself doesn't meet the definition. So just to iterate what Esther said, that it's the kind of the services in that year prior that are required. If there are new, if it's an organization that is not currently contracted as a senior center.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to add anything more to that question, Levon. Good question.
No, but thank you for the answer. We were just wondering whether or not we met that qualification, and apparently we do not at this time, so that's fine.
Thank you. And okay, and then we answered Maria's question about capital funding falling into both foundational and supplemental with the request. We have a question from Mohammed. Can you please explain what do you mean by 10 cents per 1,000 of assessed value? And so that is because the Veteran, Seniors, and Human Services Levy is a property levy tax, per $1,000 of assessed value, 10 cents goes to the Veteran, Seniors, and Human Services Levy. That is the extent that I know, and folks can step in if there's clarifying information that they can offer, but it does have to do with where the VSHSL levy gets the funds to invest in community programs like this strategy. And we have a question, is giving out food bags and nutrition class counted as a nutrition program? The answer is yes. Okay, so we have a question from Rachel. If not outside the scope of this information session, could you elaborate on how hubs will be formalized, assuming all parties have had their applications approved? And if you would like to unmute Rachel to expand upon that, on what level of formalization you're maybe asking about.
Okay, thank you. Well, within our hub, I believe all of the organizations within it are looking to reapply, but we also want, we understand that the door is open for hubs to be maybe reconfigured. Maybe we've made new partners, maybe we've pivoted in strategy in a way that makes more sense for any given organization within. And so my question is that something like grouping up into hubs or regrouping our hubs, or perhaps not, is that something that that your team will have any part in? Is that something that we just kind of let you know down the road, like, and I don't think that would be the case. So I was wondering if there's any, after we've gotten through this part and we're looking to best, group up as hubs, what that might look like. I'm not sure I could, elaborate the sense of my question further.
Sure. Yeah, I can start, and then maybe others on the team can chime in. If I understood your question correctly, we won't be, directing or guiding anybody on their hub formation, and kind of defer to.
You can come in if you want.
Defer to you all to determine what kind of hub configuration best meets the needs in your community. And I don't know if other folks would want to add to that.
It's a great question, and I think originally we were anticipating you would make those hub formations or those conversations prior to submitting an application, so you would each signal, hey, we're a part of this hub. But that doesn't stop somebody from, once a set of awardees is in the network, to say, hey, actually with the funding that we're already given, it makes sense for us to collaborate in these different ways. So I could see it both.
Yeah, thank you. We're of course open to collaborating widely, even outside of a formal hub that we might arrive at. But I was aware of that difference from last time to this time, and so we had a little, bit of a question. So, like for example, if organizations are contract is approved in May and funds start coming in July, at what point, would it be, imperative that we're working together to achieve milestones as a newly configured hub, for example? But it sounds like this is sort of a down the road question, and I thought it might be outside of the scope. So I'd be happy to revisit with Nora or relevant parties, in the future.
Good, thank you. Thanks for the question, Rachel. Got a question from Lindsay. Do you anticipate people will be asking for larger amounts in part 2 than part 1, since the cap for part 1 is significantly less than what was awarded in the last iteration?
I can take this. While the funding in the last iteration spread across and was different, so depending on what senior center and what organization, there was different amounts of funding based on requests and available funds. So that isn't actually the case for all the tier. We anticipate there will be awards that are different from last session. Some may be more and some may be less depending on the suss out. But what is true is that the foundational funding will be awarded to, will be given to all awarded applicants. So if you submit your application and you are awarded, you will be given foundational funding. Some of that foundational funding, for some centers, the foundational funding will be what's needed to run your senior center as a strong and vibrant organization. Others will also request supplemental funding to support that. And our expectation is that no awarded organization will be solely reliant on the VSHSL funding for their organizational structure and their operational costs, because that just isn't what this funding is. But it does provide a kind of a foundational piece. And so people's responses and applications will vary depending on what their particular needs are. So I don't think we can anticipate, across the board, one more funding in one for supplemental versus foundation across. That's really individual to need, specific to the individual organization's needs and program aspirations, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, Tracy. Thank you.
Right. Next question is, we are community based in City of Seattle using our facility as general function. Will that meet the definition of senior center? And Henry, feel free to unmute and expand upon your question.
Sure. Thank you very much for taking that question. Yeah, on top of that, we never get any engaged with any funding. So I don't know the word experience mean to our organization, but we have been here for a long time and we never get engaged with the city funding or county. So does that mean that we are inexperienced?
No, or not necessarily. I don't know if Nora or Tracy want to chime in, but I would say, take a look at the RFP, eligibility, and what the strategy is asking, but not having had a contractual relationship with either the City of Seattle or King County does not disqualify you from this opportunity.
Thank you for clearing that out. Yeah, I think the previous written on the chat, I think somebody addressed that already. So appreciate that.
Thank you. From Nathan, we have, if an organization operates more than one senior center, can each center apply separately under its own $120,000 limit?
I will take that. For each foundational award, the entity awarded and the amount must meet the definition of a senior center on its own within the containment of that center. So if an organization is operating several senior centers and they each meet the definition of the 3 days a week, the hours of programming qualified, then there's a possibility for those to be awarded. And again, that's a cap. And so if an organization has a history of not spending the funding available to that level, that's a consideration for how much to request in the foundational budget. Did that answer it, Esther? Did I capture the response to that?
Okay. So the next question, it looks like, has to do with the City of Seattle funding, specifically the budget template. And so I guess to answer that, we may amend that attachment specifically. As Angela mentioned, we are kind of waiting on official confirmation. But when that information is available, then the budget template will make more sense than it might now. But Angela, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to Vidrana's question about the budget specifically for the City of Seattle funding.
Yeah, so again, budget, and I see that, will we have instructions ahead of time on how to complete the budget? Will it still be due on March 13th? Again, soon as we know more, we're gonna, release information of be in attachment E and have the information scheduled so that we can talk about the City of Seattle funding.
Thank you. We've got a few comments, a question that I believe got answered, but to reiterate, any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today, please do add it in the chat or feel free to email Nora, and the responses will be posted to Zoom Grants regularly. Okay, so there is a question. We are providing services to Asian seniors. Are we a senior hub or a senior center? So that would be up to you as a potential applicant to decide. A senior hub does specify focus on a cultural community, and if that is something that you feel connected to, then that can be a consideration that you make. There's just different groupings of senior centers, but all are senior centers. But if you have a specific focus area that you'd like to focus on, then that would constitute a senior hub activity. So would kind of defer to applicants to make that determination for themselves and how they choose to expand upon that in their application. And feel free to, email follow-up questions to Nora or any other questions that you have regarding that. But I'm going to move us along to Radine's question, which is, we received funds to purchase a vehicle in the last RFP. Do we get to keep that vehicle or do we have to return it and add funds in this RFP to buy it back? Radine. Go ahead, Tracy.
We are not returning vehicle. If an applicant is awarded in this round, resources provided through other rounds will continue to be at the availability.
I didn't mean that to be a rude question or anything, but it does say in the contract that the vehicle may be asked to be returned.
Yep.
So that was my question, was if it is, then should we, if we need a car, should we put that in our new request?
It is not our intention to take resources from organizations that are providing the services and supports. That language is in the vehicle language in the, those events where there might be breach of contract or there might be other reasons to take that back. So.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it.
Good question. Okay. Next question we have is, our organization has 2 senior centers in different locations. Are we considered a senior center or a senior hub? And I think following up on Tracy's response, you'll need to make that determination based on your focus area. If there's anything that we can clarify about that, please do add it in the chat or follow up via email. Okay, so we have a question related to senior hubs. Can you please provide further definitions or examples of emphasis on geographic, cultural, or topic area?
Do you want to take that, Esther, or?
I was going to say, Tracy, can you take that one?
Sure. Yeah, so senior hubs we have senior hubs who are spread across a particular area of the county and who find that collaborating and partnering together to perhaps share staff or to share resources helps them address that geographic area of senior needs a little bit more robustly than they are as an individual center, or the kind of leveraging of those partnerships support a stronger programmatic ability to provide services. Other senior hubs are spread across the whole county, not just a geographic area, and address a particular cultural community who might find either one center that fits their identity and wanting to work with that particular hub, or a series of partnering hubs that spread across the county to meet the needs of a community who have members scattered throughout the county. And a topic area is, there might be a hub that has a senior center that has the ability to provide the hub level of services on something such as supporting people with dementia and helping provide that resource for people across the county. Did I get that, Esther? Do you want to add?
No, that was great. There was kind of a follow-up question from Kate as well, around the number of sites, since there may be considered a senior hub with 3 distinct senior center sites under one nonprofit umbrella. And so you may choose to partner with the senior centers under your nonprofit umbrella, and or you may choose to partner with other separate nonprofit entities or public entities. So that will be something that applicants would need to determine that best meets the needs of their senior community that they serve. So there aren't necessarily limits on the partners within your hub, but they would need to be kind of formalized partnerships if you do choose to do the partnering senior center, senior hub approach. Okay, so we have a question from Radine. What if the funds are used for a program that happens to be housed in a senior center and the hosting senior center is not asking for any operational or capital funds? Will the program be denied full funding and have to look for other funds elsewhere?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
It was mentioned that it wasn't the expectation of this grant to fully fund like an organization. That's what I thought I heard. Like the center needs to look for funds other places for their operations and things like that, that the grant wasn't set up to just 100% fund a senior center. And so my question is, if you use the funds to offer a program that could be housed somewhere else, it could be housed at social security office. It could be like a resource navigation program that is housed at the senior center, but none of the money only goes for that program. Will that same thing about not funding it, the intent is not to fund it solely. That's the part I'm not understanding.
So I guess it's not, maybe the emphasis is it's not on intent, but on expectation that organizations that run programs in senior centers and any nonprofit or any entity that provides services has probably numerous funding streams that come together to provide the operational support. So that was my direction around that, is the expectation that like we expect that there will be this, that the VSHSL funding is one of many streams that come together to provide the support for the program.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So
okay.
I'll just
Thank
stop
you.
there.
Right. We have a question from Jenna. Was a cap mentioned for supplemental funding? The answer is no. No cap. There is no cap to supplemental funding, but we will be balancing the supplemental funding awards with the number of applicants. And so our intention is to fund up to 22 senior centers, given the amount available for supplemental funding. I see there is a raised hand. Katie Parker, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you. I just have a question in regards to the question you just answered. If we were to put in an application request and not get fully funded, will we have a chance to go back and look at what we put in? Or is the expectation, even if we don't get fully funded, that we move forward with the thing? Because I mean, if we overcommitted and don't get the full funding, I want to make sure we can actually do what we're saying. So I guess the question I have is, if we don't get fully funded, what is the expectation from the funding source?
Great question. And we would work with all providers who are awarded to say, this is the amount, what's, these are the things that you put into this award, and you had this, you told us it would cost, it's going to cost you this, and we aren't able to give you that. So let's work together in our contracting to see what's achievable and what the program piece is. Nora, you're the contracts lead. I want to make sure I didn't muss that.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Want to add more to that, Tracy?
No, sorry.
Okay. Question in the chat. Our organization provides services and programs to a specific population of seniors via our VSHSL contract. If we can provide services and time required to serve public seniors, would we be considered a senior center to apply for this grant?
I'm not going to answer that specific question because I don't want to provide answers too specific. Yes, this program is or not, but I'm going to direct you back to the definition of a senior center, and that eligibility is that you organization must have been providing senior center services prior to this contract, prior to this awards, for at least a year prior to applying. So our intention is to, yeah, so I'll stop with that.
Thank you. A follow-up question from Maria around hub partnerships. How formal and far along should they be to be included in the grant application? We have a short-term contract with one entity, agreements not yet formalized with another, and at least a couple conversations ongoing for projects later this year and growing into next. Should we have memorandums of understanding or formal agreements with those orgs to include in the application?
Go ahead. Do you want to take it, Nora? Do you
Yeah.
want to...
I can say, you know, the contract will begin on July 1st, and so it's not an expectation that you develop formal relationships like you're describing without the funds in place. And so if it's part of your application to use the funds to develop those formal partnerships, you would want to describe that in your application and reflect it in the budget as well.
Thank you very much. It just those little details come up. So thank you.
And Esther, I did see a question from, oh, it might have been to me directly. It's about hubs as well, so I will just read that from Diane. She said, we are a senior center and we were part of a hub previously that we continue to operate as. To apply for funds, do we submit individual applications indicating that our plans are to continue to partner in a variety of areas and programs? So yes, you do want to submit individual applications, and you can describe that hub partnership and your roles in it, as well as submitting supplemental budgets that identify how the funding would be spent. And we have 3 minutes left today, just to restate that all of the questions that were asked, and some of which we will have to get back to you on, are going to be published to Zoom Grants in a written document. We're going to need a couple of days to put that together and make sure every question is answered. In addition, this meeting has been recorded, and a recording will be posted to Zoom Grants, so you can watch it as many times as you need to. And then you can also email me, and can put that email address in the chat. And it is also mentioned in numerous locations on Zoom Grants. And I did see one last question. I think we can answer it in the time allowed. Is the $90,000 funding for a hub, or each part of the hub is granted $90,000 if chosen? And so I think that question is looking at perhaps Group A of the foundational funding to get the $90,000 amount, and just to go back to the different parts. Part 1 is foundational funding. Depending on your organization's characteristics, you will either apply for Group A, a maximum of $90,000, or Group B, a maximum of $120,000. And each individual senior center should submit its own application for the foundational funding. And then if you want to apply for supplemental funding as a hub, you would use Part 2, the optional supplemental funding application, for additional funding. Okay, and I think we're gonna end the new question responses now. Thank you all for hanging in there for these last 2 hours. Really appreciate your time, and thanks to my King County colleagues for all the work that went into today.
Thanks everybody for the great questions.